How you doing? It's Dan at Kent Boot Camps. Hope you're well, having a good week. We're back on the third edition of the core. Steve's here, look, hanging around. We thought we'd come inside. This is a little bit moist outside. Anyhow, don't kind of think anything different from me. I am still a hardcore boot camp trainer. Anyhow, what was quite interesting, which kind of jogged this actual talk, was went up to London and saw my wife performed amazingly well in a half marathon around the parks, and I was just watching people running along, and you've got the kind of fast elite sprinters that kind of doing the half marathon in just over an hour, and as the kind of people got slower and slower, you could kind of see this biomechanical sort of morph into a desk position. And one of the things about running is it's all about transferring force through the body without kind of injuring yourself. So all the fast runners are there, everything's in line, head still, body's nice and still, pelvis level. And as it got slower and slower, people were kind of dropping out of position. And because they're adapted at sitting around a desk all week, that's what was happening. So what we're going to do today is talk about some core exercises, which are very specific, which are going to take you back to ground level and progress you through to some different options and how you can improve core stability in a functional pattern, and it will help with things like running and all the rest of it, which will help with knee injuries, ankle injuries, back injuries, you name it. So I'm going to hand it over to Steve. I'm going to be on the floor doing some exercises, and he's going to talk you through what it's all about.
Morning, boot campers. Okay, so in part one, we spoke about...
There we go, Steve.
So in part one, we spoke about the flexors and how these work to stabilise the front of the spine. And then we talked about these obliques, how they side bend and they rotate the spine. And now we're going to talk about how your core muscles incorporate these extensors. Now, like Dan just spoke about in the running, this lat works with this glute and merges into some fascia into your lower back. Now, enable that to happen, we've got small intrinsic muscles at the back, just like we have at the front, with this transverse abdominis that we spoke about in part one, how it keeps the front of the spine still, but it also interlinks into this fascia into the back with the internal oblique, but we've also got small intrinsic muscles. These are your multifidus, interspinalis muscles. These create segmental stability. So what we're going to do, I'm going to get Dan down, and what we're going to do is we're going to show you the progression from the alternate Superman. So this exercise is called the alternate Superman, okay? And what we're going to do is activate the glutes and activate the shoulder extensors at the top and down, and the other side. Now what you can see is that left arm works with that right leg, and the right arm works with the left leg. Now this is where you would start to create that stability in what's called the posterior chain. Okay, now how would we progress this? Well, we progress this into a horse stance. So obviously the more higher up he is, the more stability he now needs. So this is where you would start, keeping that whole spine in line, and then what we would do is we would extend the hip on one side, and we would flex the shoulder on the other side, and we would keep everything in line. Okay, so this is creating stability, and then what we would do from that position is we would bring the elbow into the knee without touching the floor. So bring the elbow into the knee down, and now what we're doing is recruiting the abdominal wall, but to allow that to happen there needs to be segmental stability in the spine to allow him to do that. Now you can see how that would have a big crossover to running, but before we get into running, little demonstration there of how to run. What we're going to do now is show you how we can incorporate that into reptilian crawls and why we do reptilian crawls in the boot camp. Okay, so Dan's just going to show you some techniques going forward, how that arm works with the opposite leg. So every time that arm moves, his leg moves and he keeps that spine in line. So research by Lieberson, amongst others, has shown that if you didn't crawl as a baby, then that can result in lower back pain as an adult, because you end up with what's called an ipsilateral crawl pattern. Dan's going to show us an ipsilateral crawl pattern where the arm on the same side and the leg on the same side work together. It's quite difficult to do. So this is think about it as a learned behaviour. And then what we need to do is get back into full reptilian crawls. So as you can see, every time that opposite arm moves, that opposite leg moves, creating that sling or that stability in the lower back, enabling you to run efficiently, hopefully pain-free. Lovely.
Give it a whirl. Not easy, these reptilian kind of cross pattern things, but very, very functional and have a great crossover to running and everything else, just to keep us nice and stable. Give it a whirl, start at your own level, and we'll see you next week. Cheers now.